G'day viewers, Peter here. How are they hanging? Now this will be the final one in the little project I've done on sheet metal, and so this is just to tidy up any loose ends and things like that, and I don't think you've got to see the finished product, but I mounted it last weekend, and I'm happy with how it came out, and it has rained, so it's actually doing the task that I wanted it to do. So we'll just go and have a look at the finished product. I'm not sure what the lighting is like here, but you can see it's a little bit shiny around where the silicone is touching the brickworks, but there's not a lot I can do about that. But it keeps the water out, and you can see it keeps the rain off. And it really would have to be a pretty serious, like if you look at the angle, the rain would have to be coming on an angle like 45 degrees or something to get in there and cause me any problems. And you know, this is a reasonably sheltered spot, so I think that's all looking pretty honky-dory. And it's got all folded edges. This edge here folds back 20 millimeters. And this one down the bottom folds back 10 millimeters, as you might remember. And it's surprisingly robust. I can't pull it off the wall, so it's quite strong, and you're not going to cut yourself. And you know, the miters didn't come out as well as I would have liked, but they're pretty friggin' good. So I'm happy with that. I think I've got to talk for a minute about Mr. Woodford. I don't know if I mentioned, I went to a technical school, and in Australia that's a school that's leaning towards hands-on skill, trade skills, more than tertiary education preparation. And so in 1971, 2 and 3, yeah, that'd be right, I was in Form 1, 2 and 3, which is years 7, 8 and 9. And I had a teacher teaching sheet metal named Mr. Woodford, Bob Woodford, and he lived in Ringwood, and he used to come to Williamstown Technical School, which is, you know, like an hour and a half on the train in the morning and an hour and a half on the train in the night. And he might have been there longer, but he was certainly there for those 3 years, because I remember in fourth form he left, and I was very upset because he was a significant teacher in my life and somebody that I really liked. And he went to Mooroolbark Technical School, which was much closer to his house, so I can see why he did that. But I really liked Mr. Woodford. Mr. McCubbin, who taught me woodwork, he was probably the most influential teacher in my life. And I really loved Don McCubbin. He lived on Blackshaws Road. Really good woodwork teacher. And but Mr. Woodford taught me sheet metal. Now, of course, we had all the facilities, like we had anvils and pan brakes and press brakes and rolling machines, and all the equipment at a technical school was very well equipped. And so he taught me in those 3 years just practical skills, which I've carried through my life as a truck driver and a farmer. I've been had lots of jobs, and I've used the skills that I learnt. Now, the preceding videos were pretty rough and ready, but it turned out a perfectly usable product that is, you know, there's nothing wrong with what I'm looking at on the wall there. And I owe a lot of that to Mr. Woodford. So I suspect he was about 40 years old in the 1970s, so I suspect that he's no longer on this mortal coil, but I just didn't want him to go unremembered, because he was a significant teacher in my life. So that's about Mr. Woodford. And but anyway, I've ended up with this product. Actually, for those international people, you may not be familiar with Australian plugs. That's what an Australian plug looks like. And I personally think these are the best plugs and sockets in the world. There's 4 major types in the world, because I've done a bit of travelling. There's your European, your British, your American, and your Australian. Now these, according to the IEC legislation, these are called, I think, Type L plugs, and they're not Australia. They're unique. They're not. Oh, they were originally unique to Australia. They came standardised in, I think, 1938. But a chap in America named, what was his name? Mr. Hubble. He was a manufacturer and an entrepreneur, and he designed the American AC electrical plug and socket, I think about 1900, and then about 1915, somewhere around there, he designed this one, which obviously is a big improvement, but because the other plugs were in, so many of them had been manufactured, were in use, that they stuck with the older system. It's a bit like the QWERTY keyboard. There's an improvement on that, but training the people to use it is too hard. So so this Type L plug, well, that was invented by him in 1915 or so. It became redundant in America, but in Australia they used it. Well, they didn't use it. There was no legislation in Australia up until 1938, but prior to that, the State Electricity Commission of Victoria, which is where I live, and the chap from Gerard Industries, which is over in South Australia, and the chap from Clipsal in Melbourne, all got together and decided this was the best plug in the world. So they started using it, and they started using it in the 1920s, I think. And then so by 1938, they got together and made legislation that this was what we're going to use. And then I think the guy from Henderson Plastics, HPM up in Sydney, Henderson Plastics Moulding, he got on board. So once we had Melbourne, or say Victoria, New South Wales and South Australia on a standard, really the other states had to follow. So then it became national, and that's what happened in 1938. But I've used all the plug systems, and I just believe this is easy to use, it's reliable, it's cheap to make. I kind of feel that this is the best plug system in the world. I think the British system would be a close second. And I take some solace in, that's my opinion as an engineer, but I take some solace that China had no standard, and the biggest population in the world, and they're not stupid people, and the latest to get electricity, and they looked at all the plug systems in the world and they chose the Australian system. And so now I think Australia use it, New Zealand use it, pretty much all the Pacific Islands, Argentina, strangely enough, and then China, which is the biggest country in the world, and really they're adjacent to Europe. So you'd think they would have taken the European plug if they thought it was any good. Although the Chinese turn it upside down, they have the Earth at the top, but the plugs are interchangeable. So yeah, that's a history lesson on electrical plugs. But I kind of like the Australian system. I think it's excellent and it's cheap to produce. So, all right. So I think that brings us to the conclusion of my sheet metal industry and how to do stuff with not much, which is what I always tend to do. So, uru.